Not all that long ago, school officials locally and across Vermont were looking forward to a reopening of schools this fall in a much more normal fashion than was the case a year ago. But the emergence of the Delta variant of the COVID-19 virus has upended at least parts of that hoped for outcome. With case counts on the rise again, school officials are trying to balance rules around face masks, vaccines, safety, and getting the educational process going again. The state's Agency of Education has issued a two-page guidance document, but it is not mandatory, and local school boards and districts have leeway on how they wish to implement it. It calls for students and staff returning to school when indoors to wear face masks for the first 10 instructional days of the coming school year, until the vaccination rate among students is at least equal to 80% of the school's population eligible for a vaccine. After that, masks would no longer be required for those eligible for vaccination, meaning students 12 years old and older. The Agency of Education is making recommendations, not regulations, as Education Secretary Daniel French told us in a recent conversation.
We're pretty confident that a state of emergency is not going to be necessary this year to manage the pandemic in schools and otherwise in our society. And that's an important distinction from last year because under a state of emergency and under the governor's emergency order, as secretary, I was delegated specific authority, as was Commissioner Levine, to operate some institutions, including schools, in a manner to ensure the broader public safety. That's not the context we're in now. So what that means at the local level is that the state, and largely Commissioner Levine and I, what we did last Thursday is we're publishing recommendations for schools to follow. That's different than last year when we were publishing essentially regulatory guidance that was mandatory. So we're doing our best to parse through the information as we've always done and to have that be informed by the practical operational variety of our school system, and to provide recommendations. And I think that would be challenging in itself for folks to wrap their heads around. But of course, now we have the Delta variant, which is very challenging, I think, to any decision making. So we're, at this point, recommending that all schools open with everyone wearing masks. And then, we're really trying to leverage our high vaccination rate. And that's been a challenging point for us because a lot of the national guidance, which came out towards the end of July, beginning of August, because there are many school systems in the country that open in August, early August, those guidance documents, both from the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics, were, from our perspective, sort of generic and very general, and that didn't really seem to acknowledge that New England states and Vermont in particular have exceedingly high vaccination rates. So that was sort of our first challenge in our decision making. And then secondly, the fact that we have a large number of our students who are vaccinated within that high vaccination rate, and it's really the 12 and under that are a concern. We are making an effort to, this month to really push out vaccination clinics for all those that are currently eligible for vaccination. But to not draw some distinction between high schools, for example, where there's a very high level of vaccination in Vermont versus our elementary schools where there's still a large number of students who aren't even eligible for vaccination, I think was an important distinction for us. So what we're recommending is we start everyone with 2 weeks with required masks, but then we are recommending that folks start to parse out a little bit what they do next based on the relative vaccination rates of those that are in their buildings that are eligible for vaccination.
Meanwhile, local school leaders are trying to move forward around the once again concerning safety issues while gearing up for a full-blown return to in-person learning. Depending on the grade levels being taught in various schools, that presents different issues. Randy Lowe, the superintendent of the Bennington-Rutland Supervisory Union, oversees 6 elementary and middle schools.
We have decided to open the year until further notice, having everyone wearing masks in our schools. Because we don't offer a high school, we have all of our schools are either through 5th grade, 6th grade, or 8th grade. So we don't find ourselves in a position in which 80% of the population, the student population, would be eligible for the vaccine or vaccinated. Given conditions right now with the Delta variant, I chose to say we're all wearing masks at this point. I think it's the safest and best way for me to ensure that we have conditions to provide a continuous educational experience for our kids. So we will definitely be wearing masks beyond the first 10 days of school. Our students won't have the opportunity to be vaccinated until something's approved. There's discussion that may be in October, but who knows? So if that's the case, then we're looking at the two-dose regimen followed by another 2 weeks. So I expect it to be quite some time before, unless things change, unless the guidance change and conditions change. Given where we are right now, I expect us to be in masks for quite some time.
Mark Tashin, the headmaster at Burton Academy, described their approach and their plans for reopening school.
The guidance from the Agency of Education is that the entire school community should be masked for the first 10 days. That's what we plan on doing. We are now in the process of gathering vaccination data. And if we are above 80% vaccination rate, and I expect us to be above 80%, then the guidance calls for no restrictions, and we plan to follow that guidance. We are obviously going to be monitoring a variety of factors as we go, and if need be, we would, I could see asking people to wear masks or requiring people to wear masks for some limited period of time based on local conditions or specific in-school conditions. But in general, my sincere hope is that we can be an island in the Delta storm and largely escape it. But hope is not the only strategy. I mean, hope and vaccination and constant vigilance, I think, is what will get us there.
In Arlington, which is now part of the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union, the school board held a lengthy discussion about the Agency of Education's guidance, and especially the piece around face masks, before deciding to follow it for the first 10 days of school on a 3-2 vote by the board. The school board will likely revisit the question at its next meeting on September 8th. William Basic, now an assistant superintendent as the Arlington and Sandgate school districts transition into the SVSU, described the plans for reopening schools in Arlington.
We're going to follow the AOE guidance. The board supported it on a 3-2 vote. To be honest, though, and kind of in defense of the board, it wasn't that they were anti-wearing the masks. They were kind of very confused about the guidance and thought it was ambiguous in a lot of ways. So one of the things they wanted to do was have a lot of questions answered about the guidance. So the 3-2 vote was close, but it wasn't because they were not anticipating the children wearing the mask. Again, I think it was around the clarity of the language.
So the plan then, at this point, then, is to ask students, and I'm assuming from pre-K through 12th grade, when they come to school, return to school, to be wearing masks?
Yeah, we actually start in 2 days. We are one of the earliest starting districts. We start August 25th, so our teachers are back today. Yes, they will be wearing masks in school. Certainly we won't be wearing them outside, which is good. There's another school board meeting on September 8th, specifically around the AOE guidance. We anticipate things changing. As we know, the guidance was put out around August 4th, which is a little bit late to start out with. But the Delta variant has really begun surging within our area here. We are seeing some cases around town, which we did not all summer. We were able to run 120 staff and students in our elementary school with no masks throughout the whole summer. Sorry, not the whole summer, but for 5 weeks, and we did not have any cases or any scares. So, we are expecting probably a case or two within the first couple weeks because they're naturally coming up in Bennington County. So we're going to have to be ready.
And meanwhile, up at the Long Trail School in Dorset, which teaches students from grades 6 through 12, Seth Linfield, their head of school, told us about their plans.
We opened with our all-time record enrollment of 240 students. We are masking through Labor Day, whether everyone needs to mask, whether vaccinated or not, and then we will reassess where we are at Labor Day, and we really are continuously analyzing and evaluating from a health and safety perspective. We do require a form, whether vaccinated or not. This allows us to monitor what percentage of our eligible students are vaccinated.
All told, it's a more complicated picture than seemed likely back earlier this summer, when vaccines seemed to have had the COVID-19 virus on the run. But it's also a fluid one, and subject to change depending on how the Delta variant plays out. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.